Hello, Mermy. So today I want to discuss the god, or rather, how many neo-pagan groups and solitary practitioners tend to over-focus on the goddess. And basically, now I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers or that my opinions are for everyone. I do feel that spirituality is a very individual thing. And so my opinions here might not work for everyone. So keep that in mind. However, I do feel that there is an importance in having a balance between female and male elements within pagan practice. Very often we criticize Christianity for its over focus on a masculine deity, and that female deity uh, and saints, generally that will be then Maid Mary and saints, gets delegated to a background role. I mean, there are even old texts that did not make it into the final print, as you would say, of the Bible that presents Mary's birth as well as being a miracle birth. So that, and there's a lot of Catholics that do give her a more divine role. But yeah, all mentions of femininity in deity is sort of delegated to the side, and we as pagans very often criticize Christianity for that. While at the same time, many pagans turn around and do exactly the same thing. We overfocus on the goddess and delegate the god into a sort of consort position. But in reality, they are equals but opposites. They play off one another. They are yin and yang, and as such, they need one another. And you can see that with just if you go into a bookstore's pagan section. If you're lucky enough to have a bookstore near you that actually has a pagan section, but anyway, look up paganism on Amazon. Sorry. Still a bit of a cold here. Anyway, you will see book after book after book after book about the goddess and world goddesses and so on, and very few books about the god, though of course there have been a few books as of late, and that is a great trend. But if you look at your random pagan's altar, you will tend to, and I do this too. I'm not lecturing here. I have goddess figurines on my altar currently, and yeah, I do sort of have a god representation because I have a candle holder with a sun, uh, with a sun carving, and so that represents the god. But yeah, in very many private altars you will find the god either not there or a lot more goddess. Now, to my defense in this, I would say that it's more natural for a female practitioner to focus on the god and a male practitioner, for a female practitioner to focus on the goddess and a male practitioner to focus on the god. However, for everyone there needs to be some balance, and I do feel that what I'm saying now might be controversial, but I do feel that a lot of people come to paganism from Christianity, from a Judeo-Christian background, where they have been deprived of female deity, they've been deprived of female spirituality. And so when they come to paganism, they tend to overcompensate. And I do feel that that's a trend that we should turn around because the god is more than just a consort for the goddess. The god is one part of the pair that makes up deity. So, yeah. And we also very often talk about the triple goddess, but in reality there is at least three aspects of the god as well. Really, there are more. I generally see five distinct, a pentagram, if you will, of aspects of the god, because he is the child of promise, basically the prophesied child born into the world to saint. So there's one aspect. Then he is the young lord, uh, the inexperienced lover, the basically the young stag out to defeat his elder. Then you have the sun god. That is the god at the height of his power. This is perhaps the most iconic picture of the god, and there's also one of the. I mean, even for example, Theseus, very much in with what the symbolism he is often depicted as, is a sun god. It is the height of masculine power. And then you have the wise old king, which is the god when he's starting to decline. Well, he's still extremely wise. He's the wizened old warlord. There's a lot of gods that would fall into this category. For example, Odin, who is this wise old father figure. Of course, he can kick butt, but he's this wise old man. And then we have the god as the lord of the underworld, who has been sacrificed and returned. He has been sacrificed, now he's the lord of the underworld. Then, of course, he returns again as the child of promise. But of course, you can boil these five aspects, if you will, down into your typical idea of a trinity. You have the young god, basically the child of promise. He is masculine, the spiritual masculine to be. He is pure potential. Then you have the sun god, basically the realized potential, the god at the height of his power, the warrior, the father. And then you have the dark god, which is basically the god in decline and the lord of the underworld. So the same concepts that we see within the goddess, we also see within the god. The difference is that you don't have the death and rebirth aspect of the goddess. She sort of is all of these things at the same time. Basically, within Neo Pagan god, the goddess is unchanging. She is the thing that always is, while the god is in constant flux and changes, and his role compared to her changes. But she is always both his mother, his lover, and his murderer. But that doesn't mean that the changes of the god is any less important than the three phases of the goddess. And I think that's very important. So, yeah, so what can you do to focus more on the god? I think that one of the things we can do is to be better, and I definitely need to do this too, better at representing him on the altar. And I mean, it's more difficult because you go into a pagan store, you'll find a lot of goddess statues. Finding a good god statue, however, is very often a lot more difficult. Now, my recommendation there is to look for things like, for example, you can go online and search up, for example, novelty, like little figurines of Greek and Roman, and search up heroes, for example. Uh, there's a lot of, for example, Leonidas statues. That can be a good god statue. I was very lucky for my main altar to find at a Salvation Army store this little wood sprite. Reminds me of Pan that I have. But of course, anything that is phallic can be used to represent the god, and anything that has to do with the sun can represent the god. So if you run out of anything else, go get yourself the most yellow and orange My Little Pony you could possibly find, preferably a sun or a star stamped on his ass, and use that. Basically, anything that is phallic, that means basically anything that's longer than it's wide, or anything that is represents the sun or the star that you can use, or anything that represents basically show a man, basically. And you can get lucky and find good god statues, of course, but if you can't find them, those are examples that you can use. And I think basically, I think it's as wrong to over focus on the goddess as it is to over focus on the god, because they are two parts of a whole, and there needs to be balance between the two. I think that a lot of the problems, and I love Christianity, I think it's an amazing religion, but you can't put on a rug that there also are some problems, at least with way many Christians practice the religion. And I think that some of the problem stems from that they over focus on male divinity to the point of completely ignoring female divinity, so that those female values, they are not appreciated. Only the male ones are, and that creates a imbalance. However, you will get the same problems, perhaps not exactly the same, but you will get problems if you do the same but over focus on the feminine. So I think you need a balance of the two. And really, well, this is a bit of a getting off track. You can see some of the same problems in society, in that a lot of people, for example, quite a few feminists, they over focus on female rights instead of focus on equality and balance. Meaning, for example, that there's the battle isn't won. There's still areas where there are inequality, where men and women are treated differently. But those areas where it's men that is treated at a disadvantage tends to be far less focused on by groups that fight for gender equality than um, than when it's women. And that is usually then justified by, but there's been women has been the oppressed party, so it's more important to get them up to the same level than it is to adjust where even when just where men are being mistreated. And I don't completely agree because I feel that the goal has to be to get equal rights no matter what gender you are. And you can see the same concept within religion that when people come to paganism from Christianity, they tend to overfocus on the goddess because they have been worshipping just a male deity their entire life, so they overfocus. It's the same thing when somebody then overfocused on female rights over male rights, and the same when they overfocus on the goddess instead of the god. And I think that a goal has to be to attain balance. Because if you look around, you can see the goddess and god in everything. And they are two forces that are completely opposite and at the same time is working together. For example, the goddess is the field, while the god is the flow that flows the field. Or, for a more modern example, a goddess would be the phone, while the god is the will and action to text on the phone. You see these principles all over, and they always work together. So they need to be balanced. Because if one of these forces becomes stronger than the other, then, I mean, you will not have children without a male and female. You will not have a field unless you both have the passive, you will not have the corn unless you have both the passive field and the active flowing. You will not have a text message unless you have both the passive phone and the active will and action of inputting the text and sending it. The forces of feminine and masculine, negative and positive, they work together, and you can see it from the most minute part of how the world is built up, with how atoms work together and so on and so forth. You can see these forces at play everywhere. And I think that we need to strive for balance. And if you focus too much on one deity, basically if you focus too much on the god or too much on the goddess, then you might want to be more aware of that and bring the other party more into your practice to attain greater balance. But again, like I said, this is just my opinion, my view of things. I'm no guru. I can just express my experience and my basically what I think about it. If it doesn't work that way for you, then of course go with what your heart tells you. And I hope you have liked this video. Have a great day. Blessed be.